Georgia, the two-time reigning, defending national champions, take on the Florida Gators, who, Joe, I will be first to admit where I'm wrong. I did not think this team would be as good as they were. I do like Austin Armstrong. We've talked about this, and I think the connection's already been made. I like Austin a lot, known him for a long time. I think he's a bright defensive guy. I think it's why he got hired at Alabama, and then Billy Napier's not a dummy. He says, look, this is an emerging star, and he's a linebackers coach. We can make him our coordinator. And then he goes over to Florida. But, Joe, I got to admit something, and I got to ask you this question. I told you I was going to give you a blind resume quarterback test. Name which quarterback is which. One is completing 76% of his passes, 1,897 yards, 12 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Now, you're Googling. I can see you typing.
No.
I literally can see you typing.
My hands are up. I haven't
The
Googled
other
anything.
quarterback number 2, 74% completion percentage, 2,147 yards, 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. Which quarterback is which?
Carson Beck's the second one.
Shit. How did you know?
You set it up too much. You said that it was going to be shocking. The one that I thought that Carson Beck wasn't going to be him. Now, I mean, it doesn't surprise me. He had a couple of shaky, I wouldn't say games. He had a couple of shaky series early on in the season. He's still
completing 74% of his passes.
Yeah.
It's not like he's been bad. He's in top 10 in passing yards. He's got 12 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. But I got to come on here and say this. The only way for me that Georgia can get beaten this game, Graham Mertz has to go off like he's done a couple of times this year, and which he has. He has multiple games of 350 yards plus. He had a 400-yard game. He's the only reason that they were in the game versus Utah. I don't think that matters, because when I look at this game, I do think, because it's a rivalry game, unexplained X's and O's will make this game close early. Okay? Just how rivalry games work, man.
Yeah.
Both teams are excited, juiced up. No matter, it can be close. I think, if Florida has a good 15 plays scripted up, maybe they can go down there and score in the opening drive. Who knows? Doesn't matter. Because the best thing, I don't want to say the best thing, but in a way, the Brock Bowers news, to me, gets Kirby to this offense and says, we got to dial in. To the defense, we got to dial in. Brock isn't here anymore. I think they go out to Jacksonville this weekend. I think that they dominate, and everybody's like, oh shit, here comes Georgia. I don't want to say that there's no chance that Florida can win this game. I don't want to go there, because I do think that they have good personnel defensively that can, and Armstrong sends enough pressure at Carson Beck that maybe he can get to him early. Who knows how that works out? I just cannot envision Georgia losing this one. I can't see it. I don't know where. Joe, I don't know anything that Florida does good enough offensively that Georgia can't stop. They're not going to run the ball against Georgia that effectively to win. I just can't see that.
Well, look, here's the reality of it. Yes, Georgia is hitting their stride. They're without Brock Bowers, but they're starting to hit that stride that we saw them flip the switch last year, and they just bullied their way through the rest of their schedule. They had a couple duds at the beginning of the season, and they just exploded, dominating defensively everybody that they played. Offense showed up when they needed them to. But the one thing, to your point, I think Auburn has illustrated to us that there is a possible formula to keep this game close. And if you keep a game close in the SEC, there's ways to pull out of it. I would actually be a little bit more specific than what you said about Graham Mertz. Yes, his performance is very important for their success. The rushing game has to be on point. Montreal Johnson, Trevor Etienne need to have really good games. But what we saw Peyton Thorne do, who's not exactly the most exhilarating rusher, he was an extension of the running game because it was unexpected. And Graham Mertz, we know, is a deceptively good athlete. They need to look at what Auburn did with Peyton Thorne and get Georgia to sell out to stop the run with either of those backs, and then have a complete misdirection with Graham Mertz from time to time on these drives. That stuff, for whatever reason, Georgia struggled to stop.
You don't think Kirby's been banging that home for 2 weeks that he's coming off a bye week?
I bet he has, and I know that Kirby is smart enough to be prepared for that, but that's literally the only thing. Here's my whole point here. That's literally the only thing that Florida can have that will help them keep this game close.
Graham Mertz has got to be Superman. And look, Joe, I know that you crapped on him more than I did. You did not like Graham Mertz. I was kind of a little bit more lenient on the guy because, I mean, look, I thought Wisconsin was a dumpster fire offensively.
He's just very mid. He doesn't do anything exciting.
I don't think he's mid anymore. I think he's above average. You can't have multiple games, Joe. Again, look, we're talking about Power 5 opponents. Okay, Power 5 opponents. He's throwing for over 350 yards. Mid quarterbacks don't do that. Mid quarterbacks, Joe Milton is a mid. Right? Like you would say Joe Milton is a mid-average quarterback. I think Graham Mertz has played above that. I think he's been better than that. And I see Elks' comment, and it's a point that I actually wrote down and wanted to bring up. Everybody keeps saying, well, Auburn, without Brock Bowers, they would have lost to Auburn. Okay. You're not wrong. I don't disagree with that. But I'm going to use Elks' analogy. With 11 people on the field, are you sure Ohio State wins against Notre Dame on the road? Good teams, Joe, you said on Sunday, find ways to win. Now, that I know that I could say that because Elks knows I'm not like taking a shot at him. So that way I'm not in the comments. But I do agree with him. There is a flip side of that coin. Florida is a better team. So to Elks' point, Florida is a better team than Auburn is. And if Auburn can have success offensively, that chaotic of an offense, we saw LSU's defense stop Auburn. Okay, so it's not like there's been teams that defensively have been really bad have also stopped Auburn.
Yeah,
I just think that Kirby starts getting this thing rolling, and I think that they get the running game going early. They start pounding the rock on Florida, and eventually they're going to lean on them. I think that this game could be 34-21, somewhere around there. That's where I lean. That's where I'm.
Yeah, I don't mean to deliberately make this conversation less about Georgia, but I mean, to your point about Auburn and Florida, Florida's roster's better, but I think that Auburn's better coached. So
I agree with that. I agree with that.
To what you're talking about there,
specifically offensively.
Yes, that game was close because Hugh Freeze is a really good offensive coach. We can be critical if we want. Auburn fans are already saying the honeymoon phase is over, which is absolutely hilarious that that's the reaction to the first season with a bad roster. But I think, as you're saying here, what we saw against Kentucky is how this game is going to play out. It is going to be a boat race. It is going to be a blowout. I wouldn't be shocked that maybe this game's a little close to the first quarter. They're feeling each other out. And then we see a big rushing play break off. We see a big passing play. The thing that does scare me, though, is the fact that no wide receiver on Georgia's offense has over 400 receiving yards. And there's 6-7 games into the season or so.
Wait, you said Florida?
Georgia.
Oh, I thought you said Florida. I was like, Ricky Pearsall says hello. The White Hope. He's the new Ladd McConkey. Hey, we could have a white boy wide receiver battle. Ladd McConkey versus Ricky Pearsall.
They need McConkey back. I don't know how physically what his situation is. I know that he's been returning to the lineup, but being banged up is being banged up, and it's tough to play the receiver position banged up. What I'm getting at here, though, is that they got to use this game as that opportunity to start to find that rhythm as a passing team, because they haven't done it all season. And without Brock Bowers, you're going to need to figure out how to do that for the next few weeks.
The problem, and you brought this up pre-show, that I thought was probably one of your best comments that you've had in the last 2 weeks. If Kentucky can run the ball like that, it was your best comments. I mean, I'm just being honest.
I mean, not my predictions for the
Utah
Kentucky game, the Penn State, Ohio State game.
You can't use your picks. You can't use your picks when you're losing. You talked about how Kentucky ran the ball on Florida.
Mm-hmm.
What in the good gracious alive do you think that Georgia can and has the potential to do? That I think that's my whole point. The only thing more than them offensively, okay, Florida, I'm at. Now let's talk about Florida a little bit. Florida, to me, I just don't know if they have the dudes defensively. I don't know if they have the guys. I don't know if they have the dudes. I know that they have a pretty decent, pretty good front seven. They've shown that they can be good. I mean, Kentucky game, they didn't really show anything. Joe, I look at this one and just don't envision anything other than a 34-21 win. I can't stop seeing 34-21 in my head.
Yeah, Princely Uman is probably their best defensive player.
And 10 times fast. Hocus Pocus is coming.
I had to do so much research to figure out how to pronounce his name right. I did do the due diligence to figure out how to pronounce it. But Uman, fine football player. Probably will get drafted in this upcoming draft. But the rest of the grouping, it's relatively uninspiring. It's a group that's still trying to really solidify its identity. As you've talked about, we get games where they feel dominant, like the way that they played against Tennessee, and then they get completely dog walked like they played against Kentucky. I just think that lack of consistency is noticeable for this Florida defense, and it's just another reason why you're going up against the best team in the country and why you're just another speed bump on their way for them reaching the finish line.
To get the three-peat.
Yeah. Yeah.
One thing that I do want to mention, okay, we went overlooked because Florida played South Carolina. I know South Carolina is really bad, okay, but stay with me.
Mm-hmm.
Billy had not won a game on the road at Florida, and he changed everything up. He goes, I'm changing everything up. We're making sure that guys are in their rooms, locked in. We got to change things up. And I do think anytime a team goes on the road and they haven't gotten over the hump of winning, and then you change things up and they do, maybe Billy has found a little something, okay? Maybe this team isn't as bad as we thought. But, again, Graham Mertz has been, to me, and I'm just being honest, the surprise that nobody's talking about. Because for what it was, Joe, when he went to Florida, what did we all say? He's horrible. He's not any good. And I think that he, quite frankly, and I don't mean this in the wrong way, but this is what I talk about with guys. Please stay with me. Don't yell at me. Guys like Stetson Bennett, who are good college quarterbacks, right? Just good college quarterbacks, whatever. But better prospects, Anthony Richardson. Graham Mertz is kicking his ass when it comes to what he's done for this team so far statistically.
When I'm talking about earlier, and I'm calling him mid, and my reasoning for that, and there's other guys that I'd put into that category that are maybe slightly ahead of him that would cause some controversy and has caused some disagreement on this program. I think that with Graham Mertz, the difference between you bring up a guy like Stetson Bennett, I at least can give credit to Stetson Bennett for when he needs to step up and make plays when other parts of the offense aren't working. He was able to step up and do that. My problem with Graham Mertz is that he is a physically gifted guy and he is a capable quarterback. He was a 4-star recruit. He is a fine football player, and he's put out some
5-star recruit.
I think he was a really high 4-star. He was like one of the highest Wisconsin quarterbacks ever signed. He is one of those guys, kind of like Tyler Van Dyke. When everything goes according to plan, he'll play a really good football game. But when things aren't spelled out in front of him, he plays like shit. And that's what happened against Kentucky. He is not somebody who on a week-to-week basis I can count on being a factor in leading your team to a victory. And this is going to be another one of those games where we see him. He's going to struggle. He's going to struggle in this game. There are so many monsters on that defense for Georgia. And you know what? That conversation that we're having about him right now is probably going to be solved pretty quickly. And I'm sure he's going to have good games the rest of the year. I just don't see a guy that ascends when asked to and put up to the task of playing at an elite level. He just hasn't done it yet.
But see, here's the problem with what you're saying. You went from saying that talking about elite level to he's being mid. Nobody's saying that he's at that elite level. But here's what I do know. Here's what I do know. South Carolina, who offensively has been horrendous, that Florida team gave up 39 points. And it's a lot of reasons of why I think Georgia's going to go in there and smack that ass a little bit. But here's what I know. Graham Mertz in Florida was down in that game, right? And I look at what Graham Mertz did against South Carolina. Joe, he went, here it is, 30 of 48, 423 yards in the air, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions. He also, it doesn't show up in the stat sheet, had 6 rushes for -7 yards. 4 of those rushes, he got outside of the pocket and scrambled. If you need him to throw, you can go back to Utah. Okay, he's bailed his team out twice, meaning one of them in a loss against Utah. I think he still bailed them out from he gave them a shot in the 3rd and 4th quarter, and he had, I saw this stat today when I had Zach pull up some stats. Did you know that they're like 2nd in the country in drop passes? Meaning
Florida is
in Florida.
I would believe
not
that,
only, Joe, is he throwing for 76% completion percentage, he probably could be at 80% if his team wasn't 2nd in the country in drops. There's something to be said about a guy who, with an adjusted rate, is damn near an 80% completion percentage guy when he's got damn near 250 passes on the season. That is impressive. Regardless if you like him or not, that is impressive.
Yeah, it's statistically impressive, but when I watch him play, it's uninspired. Wait. Here's a really good example. When they won against Tennessee, what was the reason for them winning? It was Trevor Etienne. It was the run game. They exploded. They dominated. Their offense was because of the run game. And if he did anything statistically, it was because that was opened up for him by the run game. I just don't.
Joe,
I'm saying he's average.
They threw the ball
I'm not saying he's bad.
They threw the ball 3 times in the second half.
Billy
Napier, or maybe I think it was 3 or 5. Billy Napier came out in his postgame press conference and said, "Yeah, I probably got a little too conservative." You think, Billy? Now,
would you agree that was Florida's best win of the season? That was the best game that they've played all year?
No. Well, offensively or just as a team?
As a team. That's the best game that they've played.
As a team,
their best game came down to him not being an important part of the offense.
I still believe because I can't do that when he went off against South Carolina the way he did and won this team the game. I saw Anthony Richardson in that same position a year ago, and he didn't make enough plays to win it. By the way,
you played like 20 more games than
Anthony Richardson. Stop.
He's hurt.
Anthony Richardson is going to be Rookie of the Year. I said, no, he's not.
He's hurt.
He's always been hurt. He was hurt 2 years ago. It's why you remember Emory Jones?
Emory Jones stinks.
He does stink. All right. One final thing. Joe, don't quote me on this. I saw Barrett Salih, I think is his name. If Georgia does what they do defensively, it will be the first time. Saban has not even done this. 52 straight playing weeks of being a top 5 defense.
Georgia, you're saying.
Georgia of playing.
That's ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. All right.